Yo, what's up, everybody? We got a big night tonight. We're covering the Parallax View, the 1974 film, and we got a special guest to help me cover this tonight. Everybody knows Jay. What's up? Here's Jay Dyer from Jay's Analysis. What's going on, Jay?
What's up, man? Glad to be back with you.
Yeah.
This is a conspiracy classic.
Yeah.
Once again, just like Network, that I never did really break down.
Yeah. Well, you brought it up on the actually when we did Network last time. You brought this one up, and also the term future shock came up, which is interesting because Warren Beatty says that in the film. And this one comes, people. I'm sure people have seen this. If they haven't seen it, then we've done their homework for them. But this one comes obviously in the kind of, there's a bunch of 70s conspiracy films, and there are a few of them are directed by this same director, and the cinematographer also worked on a few of them. And so Network, All the President's Men, Telephone, I covered The Conversation, cinematographer did The Godfather Part 2, Apocalypse Now is in there. There's all these films. So where do you want to start with this one? Because it's of course extremely relevant right now.
Yeah, I think the most obvious thing is that there's a lot of nods that I didn't recognize until I watched it this time. There's a lot of nods to the JFK stuff. And I mean, we made a couple notes on this because Jamie and I watched this maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So I dug out my notes and we just rewatched it and noticed, quite a bit that I didn't notice. But I think now that when he gets to, the South and he's dealing with the good old boys, a lot of this, I think, is references to elements of, people thinking that elite oil people were involved in the JFK assassination. Big Texas, Dixie Mafia people might have been involved in that. So there were some nods to things that I didn't catch the first time around, but really relevant, I guess, now after, 2 weeks ago with Trump. So,
right.
Yeah, I would just kick it off by saying, yeah, it's in this vein of 70s conspiracy movies, and I just went through a couple other 70s conspiracy movies too that have been kind of forgotten. Demon Seed is interesting. It's not relevant to what we're talking about, but Demon Seed is a Dean Koontz Crowley based film or story, and that one deals with like the new birth of a new aeon through the birth of Antichrist, who's a kind of android figure. But this is more so, again, like MKUltra. I couldn't think of, there's a few other 70s stuff that's worth mentioning too, and early 80s. I don't know if you've ever seen Looker. Looker's a good, MKUltra. It's a little later, early 80s, but there were a few of these MKUltra based films at this time.
Yeah, this one also deals with the journalist, right? The consummate 70s journalist, which especially rewatching a couple times, I have questions about watching the movie because one thing that they always do, I mean, All the President's Men is probably the best example of that. Or, of course, 3 Days of the Condor. I covered 6 Days of the Condor here and 3 Days of the Condor film, the book and the film. And, of course, the end of that one is interesting because Robert Redford, it's one of the only movies that was allowed access into the Big Nine place in New York. And it ends with that. And, of course, he's walking out saying, I'm going to expose everybody. I'm going to take this to the New York Times. And they say, how are they're going to print it? All the President's Men, of course, is based in DC, and there are many scenes in the bullpen. But what's interesting about this is that you can watch this movie as kind of a straight movie, and you realize that you're watching Warren Beatty, and it's very 70s, and he's this journalist on the hunt for what happened at the scene at the beginning of the film. But then I noticed that every time he goes to talk to Hume Cronin, who's his boss in the bullpen, like there's no one there. It's just him. And I'm starting to think, like, is this some sort of form of handler that he has?
Yeah.
Is this all some sort of, is this all synthetic? Is it just a show? And that kind of plays in it. And I don't, I think you can watch the movie a few different ways, but there's so many elements in this movie that really tie into, like the scene, this is 1974. So it's after Clockwork Orange, but there's a very Clockwork Orange MKUltra.
Yeah, the Ludovico method, basically.
Yeah, but even that's different than Clockwork Orange, because when you watch Clockwork Orange and you're watching the scene where he's going through the Ludovico method, we the audience are watching what he's watching, and then we're watching him watching it.
Yeah.
But this, we see him from far away, and we are kind of getting. It's like we're supposed to be going through the Ludovico method because they're just showing the screen. It's really bizarre. So if anybody doesn't know what the movie's about, what happens is basically, just in a nutshell, is that we're in Seattle. The movie starts. We see the Space Needle. We go up the Space Needle. Warren Beatty is there, and there's I guess a presidential candidate named Charles Carroll, of all things. Charles Carroll's up there, and there's waiters. They're in the restaurant at the Space Needle, and almost right away he gets unalived. And then we find out, we cut 3 years later, and we have this scene where Warren Beatty like forces his way into these people's house. He ends up at a police station. Then he gets confronted by one of the reporters who was there and says basically that everybody that was at the event has been smoked. Everybody's going, she's in fear for her life. Warren Beatty is kind of playing the normie role here. He doesn't, he's like, it's nothing. And then it turns out that she is, like the next day. So then this sets him on a path of trying to figure out what happens. He goes through meeting various people. Then he tries to infiltrate his way into a corporation. He finds a leaflet inside of a deputy's desk or a sheriff's desk that says the Parallax Corporation. He tries to infiltrate his way into this. He goes through the Ludovico method. He ends up as a guy that he thinks he's going to expose how the corporations, or there's some sort of corporate way of playing into an assassination squad or whatever it is. And then fast forward to the end of the movie, and we have a gigantic civic center where there's another candidate, and then Warren finds himself up in the rafters. And the great twist in the movie, spoiler, the great twist in the movie is that he's up in the rafters. He looks down, he sees a rifle. The guy gets smoked. Warren Beatty tries to run out, and then he realized, and he's gone. And then we realize that he's been a kind of unwitting patsy, and he's the guy blamed for it. And probably the best part of the movie is the fact that it's bookended by the board, the government board, who's investigating it. The movie begins after the first scene. It begins with we're closing in on this kind of council of six, just like the Watergate.
It's like a Warren Commission, yeah.
The Warren Commission, and they are saying that this is there's no questions. This is a statement here. We're making a statement. We found the guy. He was a lone nut, and that's it. The end of the movie is the same guys, and they've said the same thing, but now it's Warren Beatty, and they pull away. And so we're given a kind of glance into this system, and then we're taken back out of it. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, you're good.
Well, I was going to say that the movie is so crazy because the one thing about it, and not to get too into the way that the movie is shot, but one thing about the 70s movies that's different from, for instance, the 70s, I mean, you've talked about this so much. The 70s had like this whole lineage of conspiracy movies. The 80s, it's kind of dormant. And then the 90s, again, we get a bunch of conspiracy movies, conspiracy theory. We get the Will Smith movie. Then we go into the late 90s with, ending with big sort of glimpses into Illuminate, Confirm. But the difference in these movies is that there's a kind of tonal difference. So the 70s movies deal with kind of obvious post-Vietnam, post-Watergate sort of paranoia. And the 90s, is very pre-Big Nine, post-Cold War. But the difference in the way that the movies look is that the 90s movies are usually cut. They're like jump cuts. It's, technology's coming and we're always moving fast with the characters. But the 70s movies are dominated by the framing and the scenes. So like the very first scene of this movie, it opens and we see this gigantic totem pole, and we're looking up at it. And then the camera moves, and then we see the Space Needle, and then we see these characters like rising into the sky. And every shot in this movie is dominated by like encroaching. There's nature, there's encroaching buildings, there's like big steel walls, there's the scene at the dam. And I guess what that's trying to show us is that we're getting this glimpse into this thing, and the people are very small and the system is huge. So like if we're looking at the scene here, it's like the person is down here and all of this stuff is building or dam or whatever we have. And so it reminds me of those like Japanese paintings of like the guys that are very small and then the waves or nature are very big, but instead of nature.
And that's parallax too, right? I mean, the name of the film
Mhm.
itself, parallax, has to do with the way that things appear different depending upon your vantage point or your perspective. And I think there's multiple things going on because the corporation is called, you know, the mega corp is kind of like a big holdings corp, BlackRock type of thing. It's called the Parallax Corporation or entity, and they also change and control your perspective. So I think there's a play on this idea of things being controlled based on perspective. And if Parallax can control your perspective, they can control your interpretation of reality. I think there's some quote from Kissinger or something to that effect where he says, we don't have to control reality. We just have to control the perception of reality. So I think that's the point of this corporation, this excuse me, this mega entity, and it has its fingers like an octopus. Octopus don't have fingers, but you know what I'm saying? Like if they did, they would have 8 fingers and they would be in everything. They have holdings that deal with even human engineering. So human engineering is the division that the film is concerned with, because as you pointed out, Warren Beatty is kind of stumbling down this rabbit hole of accidentally discovering what all's really going on. And it turns out that it's, as you mentioned, a kind of a private merc force that's being recruited it's like a privatized MKUltra. So they've got some technique by which they break down individuals that they've profiled that have antisocial, sociopathic, psychopathic tendencies, and that makes them a good fit for this program. And eventually, because of all the the problems that Warren Beatty's having in his life as a journalist, he's third rate. They say he's struggling, looking for money. He can't keep a girlfriend. He keeps losing his girlfriends. They keep saying, "Oh, you're perfect for this program. You need to be in the security detail. That's what you're made for, because you're not like other people." And they play on his vanity, right? They butter him up and say, "Did you ever consider that it's not you that's the problem, but it really is everyone else?" Right? That guy butters his corporate handler guy, butters him up, and they eventually get him into this. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. But yeah, I think you're right that the camera plays a trick with perspective, like you said, where you have this totem pole that's close up, and then it pans over and you see the Space Needle and it's far away, but they kind of look like they're the same size. And that's kind of, again, an example of playing with and toying with perspective, which is what the Parallax Corporation itself does.
Yeah, it's interesting when even that scene with the guy who's buttering him up, like he's literally putting butter in a pan when he's doing that.
Yeah, right.
He goes into and we get this view like we're already inside the apartment, and I'm skipping forward here, but we're inside of his shitty apartment. I mean, it's the worst apartment. The bed is right next to the front door, and then there's a little kitchenette right there, and the guy's like, something, whatever you're cooking's burning. He later comes in, and the guy's lying on his bed. His feet are in view right when he walks in, and there's the great scene, which I'll come back to, but there's a great scene where he reaches out to this psychologist, who is the guy who. That's the guy. He's in License to Kill. He like runs the whatever. He goes into this this obvious, like I don't know what it is, like a Jose Delgado facility. Walking in, there's a monkey in there playing Pong, and he shows him the list of the test for the Parallax Corporation. You'll make a great fit. And he's like, "Do you think you can tell me how to take this test and answer like a psychopath?" And the guy literally goes, "We'll just have Jim over here take it."
Yeah.
This guy, smoked his aunt and 3 other people. He'll take it. And then the camera cuts over, and this guy like walks out of the back room. Notice he takes the chimp away. Like the guy is going to be a threat to the chimp, right? The guy walks in, and the guy's like, and he's like, "Yeah, we'll just have this guy take it." And the guy looks like Charles Whitman or something. He's the most psycho. So the guy takes the test for him and answers off the charts. Like, this guy's the biggest psychopath you've ever met. And then but the question is, like, is this part of it? Is even the way that he goes about this part of it?
Right. Because as you pointed out, we wonder, and this time watching it through, I think what happens is you want a new vantage point, again, to play on the title of the film, because if you know the ending, then you want to go back and say, well, so how far were they actually profiling Warren Beatty as a suitable candidate or recruit? And it's entirely possible, like you said, to read it as if it was early on, because he tells the story, as you mentioned later on, that, oh, I was, partying one time and I was drunk, and I ended up running around somehow with my clothes off, and some woman claimed that I was a tallywhacker wagger or whatever they call it, willy wagger, whatever they call it in the movie. And he says, that ruined my career. And then he says, but I'm pretty sure somebody put something in my drink, which suggests again that perhaps he had been they had orchestrated this to get him into this position where he couldn't find good work and employment as a journalist anymore, and he would be this candidate. And it is the case, as his ex-girlfriend points out at the beginning, that he kind of is a selfish guy. Like, he doesn't really care. She points that out. She's like, you don't really care. And he's like, well, whatever. He's kind of a just aloof and apathetic. But then when she dies, he seems to be more concerned, because then he starts wondering if something really is going on. And I like the idea that a lot of these 70s movies promoted, this is like coming after Watergate, Woodward Bernstein stuff. We are sold on the idea, that that in the 70s or even in the 60s, right? That's like the height of intrepid journalists who are out there ready to get the scoop at all costs. And the truth comes first. They're willing to die. They'll lose it all just to get the story, to expose the baddies and to get the word out. And that, I think, solidified in everyone's mind this idea, particularly maybe in the 60s and 70s, of the role of the journalist as the fourth estate. And I don't think they could have had that role without movies propping them up. This is, it's interesting because nowadays we're living at the end of the fourth estate, and legacy mainline journalism is literally dying before our eyes in the last several years. Their numbers are tanking. So it's interesting to see the propaganda in the 1970s that the journalist is out there, to get the scoop at all costs. He's willing to even die, to expose somebody assassinating some politician. And of course, that's not the truth about journalists at all. Anyway, just a side note there.
Yeah. Well, also, his boss, Hume Cronin, who is this, older Hollywood actor, even in this movie, early 70s, he's like 100 years old, has this counterpoint to the Jason Robards character in All the President's Men. In that film, Woodward and Bernstein's boss seems to be, on the surface at least, he's running the Post or whatever it is, and he's he's gruff, and you got to find the evidence, and it's like a straight up journalist. He's the editor, and he's pushing them, and they're off doing their shenanigans and their journalistic work and all this stuff. But in this movie, it's different because it's much more local, and you go in and it's just one boss in there. There's one scene at the beginning where they go in, there's like two guys in a mirror, but in the rest of it, there's nobody in the office, and he takes like an unnatural ownership of his character, like he's a handler. He's offering him money. He has the money in the envelope. He talks about his personal life. We gave you another chance. You're best described as, what does he say, like a hostile misfit, before he goes on later to say that he has blatant antisocial behavior, which means I don't like to put up with people who are trying to fuck with me, or whatever he says later on in the movie. But with the Hume Cronin boss is almost like this father figure. And the weird thing about this movie is, again, that I think when you first watch it, even if people are young and they are watching it and they don't know who Warren Beatty is, if they don't know the lore of Warren Beatty or whatever, you watch the movie and you go, this guy is, he's obviously a movie star. He's a striking guy. And part of the 70s thing is you watch him and you feel like you're watching Warren Beatty play a role. But on a rewatch, you watch the movie and you go, I feel like I'm watching a guy playing Warren Beatty, playing a role. Like that. He doesn't have that many lines in the movie. He does weird things. His personal life is very strange. He's like living in a motel, and it's almost like, am I missing something? And then by the end of the movie, you kind of figure that out. And then, like you were saying, you sort of start to think, is this guy somebody else the whole time? Like, he looks like a normal guy in the movie, but he also looks like a bum at times. He looks like a,
great point.
He looks at the begin. Actually, the first scene in the movie where you see him is before the. Okay, so the movie opens. You see the totem pole. You see the Space Needle, and then you wait for this weird like parade, typical probably political parade. It's like these Indonesians are dancing, and then you see this guy come on a fire truck, like Daniel Day-Lewis in Gangs of New York or something, and it's like I love 4th of July, and then when you look at it. When we're looking side on and he goes up to be interviewed by the lady with the short hair, who's Beatty's friend later, you see Warren Beatty in the background. He's behind like 10 people. So he's not even in the forefront. He's in the background of all these people. You see the guy in the foreground with the glasses on, the Austin Tucker character. You see the lady, you're like, people are milling around, but you're like, what's this guy milling around in the background? And then when you rewatch the movie, you're like, this is an assassination. It's clearly about to happen with kind of sketchy characters in the background. But Warren Beatty's one of them. And then when they go up into the Space Needle, what's interesting is that it's very quick. It almost happens right away. We have the waiters, and we have like the switch off, the handoff with the tray, which doesn't like make sense in terms of continuity because we see the actual assassin's face, which is clearly him. I mean, like there's a post here and he kind of like comes out from behind this post. You're like, that's clearly the guy. And then we watch the assassination take place from the little balcony outside of the glass. So first we're inside of the thing. And I know that the Gordon Willis, the guy who photographed the movie, said that what he liked about what he did with these movies was like, you can see the cityscape, you can see Seattle in the background, but we're supposed to be concentrating on the characters in the foreground, but they're kind of shadowed. And so the exposure is like high. We see the outside, we don't see their faces. And then all of a sudden we go to the outside and we're looking into the Space Needle through the glass. And he said in an interview, they asked him like, well, did you do this for artistic effect? And he said, well, like, he's an older Hollywood guy. He's like, well, listen, the whole point of this, is that if I'm doing a movie and I'm going to shoot the movie and they say, all right, we need 15 cuts here in this scene, then I cut the cuts. So basically I say, oh, we can get this done in 3. And the only reason he did the glass was for effect because it allowed for when he got shot for him to streak down the glass and see the blood stain. But he said all the intellectual interpretation comes later from other people, which is an interesting way to think about artists doing this. But what it shows us is that we're like looking through the looking glass on this thing that's happened on the inside. And all of a sudden things start to change in terms of continuity, because when they chase the waiter, who is one of the guys with the gun, that later happens with Beatty. He runs, after the assassination, and he runs on top of the Space Needle and they chase him. There's a great scene where he's on top, and then he falls and he trips and falls off, gives a Wilhelm scream. But it doesn't make sense because we were just on the balcony. So there's a balcony here and then the Space Needle's here. So if he fell off, he'd fall onto the balcony. But we assume that he falls off like into space. He falls off into the ground. But the whole point of that, I think, is that, like you said, like our perspective is distorted by events. We don't know. We can't believe our lying eyes. And even though there's clearly 2 guys with the gun there, everybody's just going to remember the one guy. There's even in that scene, there's even a woman in a polka dot dress. It's RFK, right? Later, and all of the people that are there start to disappear. And when they go through the list of people disappearing, I mean, it's exactly like JFK. And
there's a news clipping, and one of the names that's listed is Sirhan. I don't know if it's a reference to Sirhan, but it was probably there intentionally just as a nod. And the same thing occurs with the way they play with the lighting when the handler comes to his apartment and sells him on coming to do the security stuff. At that point, it's basically you can't see his face. And so he's essentially become he has no identity. You can't identify him anymore. And so that you're right to point out that he was probably profiled because they saw him as a person at a breaking point who was really lost with no identity. The corporation will give you an identity, will tell you that you're, the fittest hitman out there, right? You're going to get a Hitman of the Month award.
Yeah.
You're a special person. So, and they saw him on that. But I think the other elements, as you pointed out, is that this is a recurring motif that was already making its way into film after multiple hits, including JFK, RFK, MLK. We're getting this recurring theme of the random lone shooter who is a nut, right? The lone gunman. It's being criticized in the film as obviously not the case, but as you pointed out, we only know what the official story is of these events. And so that's the parallax view, which is that there actually corporate merc squads that are hired by these cutout entities? And the answer is yes. And in fact, in the 1980s, the intelligence operations of this kind, these sort of black ops things, they get more and more privatized. There's a famous situation where Reagan privatized a lot of the intelligence in the 1980s and took it away from the more normal sort of CIA role of who would have been doing this in the 50s and 60s. Even under JFK, they were moving more of this stuff to be under the cover of NGO and other entities that weren't the classic sort of CIA and let's, bring in a Green Beret sniper out of Vietnam to do this kind of stuff. Now it's turning into more and more of a privatized thing. And that's really probably the norm today, is that this, again, it becomes prophetic in terms of how mercenaries and assassins would probably be recruited nowadays. So it also reminds me of, Dave McGowan's Program to Kill books or book, and then other books that have touched on this, which is there's the Navy guy, Thomas Nerut, who talked about the Navy recruiting psychopaths to be assassins a couple decades ago. And the Phoenix program, obviously, there's a nod probably to the Phoenix program in this film, which was the William Colby plan during the Vietnam War to basically create psychopaths to terrorize the Viet Cong to win that conflict through terror. And then, of course, Dave McGowan theorizes that many of some of the main serial killers that we know of might have been part of that program because they were trucked off to Vietnam. They did involve themselves in doing LSD and other things. And so it's very possible. It's interesting that there's not a lot of the drug emphasis in this, although he does say that one line that he thinks they drugged him at a bar one time. But I like that the method that they use is kind of ambiguous. I mean, it's corny because you just see this screen that flashes a bunch of like depression era images. And I'm sitting here thinking, this is kind of a low energy MK Ultra, very low energy, depressing MK Ultra thing where it's like it flashes mother, father, me, home, country, God, enemy, happiness, father, mother. They show, Soviets and Cold War stuff. They show Castro. So I'm thinking, well, this is really just kind of the manipulation of archetypes. So it's a very sanitized Ludovico method because, as you pointed out, in Kubrick's version of Ludovico method, you get like actual, TORTURE. You get, drugs presumably being given to Alex. You get his eyes being forcibly kept open. He has to watch just horrendous things. This is a lot more tame, a lot more boring. And we don't really know what it is, but it's almost like, well, Warren Beatty is the monkey, right? When he first walked into the Parallax Corporation, and then he's watching the monkey play the video games, which again, there's a symbolic prophetic significance there that the technocratic elite are going to make mankind be like a bunch of monkeys playing video games. Think of the viral video a few years ago where the monkey was just scrolling on his Instagram feed, right? And he couldn't stop. So that's where we are. And Warren Beatty is the experimental test chimp who will be mind controlled he's not explicitly mind controlled to be, this like programmed assassin with trigger codes like we often think of it. But it's enough of it that he's kind of nudged into being at the right place in the right time to be the patsy.
Yeah, it's interesting because the thing with the monkey is, they still show videos of monkeys like playing Pong, and they say, look, it's only a few years until, and it's like the movie's from 1974 and it's doing it in that. And you're right, the Rockwell-esque like still picture version of this with the awful song. I mean, it's almost like he's traumatized into the thing because the song is so bad. It's like, mother and daddy. And it's like this 70s sort of Country Joe and the Fish, like country song playing over. I think, I guess the point of that is that the difference between Alex undergoing this and him is that, one, we can't see Warren Beatty's character undergoing it. He's far away, just like we saw the court scene at the beginning with the bench. And he just comes in and they say, you know, please sit down. He sits down willingly and watches this film, which goes on for too long. But it's not like Alex in the Ludovico method, where Alex enjoys the he's like, I'm here to see the viddies, you know, and he's watching it. And it's actually in that film, it's like you said, it's the combination of drugs, the eyes, the straitjacket, probably electroshock or whatever, and they're not showing. And then the fact that they mix in all of the imagery with a replay of crimes that he himself has done.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it's supposed to hit him, and it's not until they add the auditory element with Beethoven that's like his programming code. But I sort of contrasted that with I read this book on Mengele, and it talks about some of the and he and Klaus Barbie both did this in World War II, you know, and they hired, so CIA hired Klaus Barbie because at the end of the war, for the folks at home, people did not know that at the end of the war, when the Allies were looking for, you know, somebody to deal with their new enemy, who better to deal with than the guy who was tasked with, you know, infiltrating or finding, breaking communists, I suppose. So one of the things that Klaus Barbie did was when they wanted to find out information or whatever, they snatched a guy. It's just like Phoenix program. When they snatched a guy, what they did was they asked him a bunch of questions, and the guy would, you know, he would lie or whatever. And they said, okay, that's fine. Well, for your service, for being in here and to apologize, we have a gift for you. And they would give him a gift, and it was a box. And it was just like in Seven, they would unwrap the box and open the box, and it was like his wife's head in the box. And they would say, now what do you think? And the guy would be completely shattered, completely broken. And they'd bring in other people close to him that he knew, and they would say, now this is going to happen in front of you. So the guy would be willing. He would just go, I'll work for you, whatever you want. And the Ludovico method, like, kind of sort of hints at that. Not like that Alex he's a psychopath anyway, but this movie's strange because they are trying to find a person to do these things, but they've already found him because he walks into the thing. But also his daily life is already in line with what they want. I mean, so for instance, when he goes and visits the like bar or whatever, and he gets in the fight with the deputy and the sheriff, he gets out of it he doesn't stop. I mean, he even comes in like through the wall, and he's still fighting. And then when they take him to the dam, he fights the sheriff. When he steals the car, he crashes to the grocery store. It's very quick. He like crashes into the grocery store, runs out the back, gets in a truck, and leaves. He's got an amazing way of getting out of trouble. He can just kind of slip through anywhere. So I guess that's part of them finding, this guy who seems to be able to infiltrate all these places. The craziest scene, though, to sort of jump ahead here, the craziest scene is when he's tasked with like following the guy, and he's the assassin. The assassin knows that he's being followed, right? And then he goes to the grocery store parking lot. He switches cars. He's got the suitcase. He goes to the airport, gets on the plane. And Warren Beatty, apparently, I guess in the 70s, you could just walk right onto a tarmac and just walk right on a plane and pay right there. I mean, it's crazy. He just walks onto the plane. But that's not the crazy part. The craziest part is that when you rewatch the movie, you realize Warren Beatty follows the guy onto the plane. He knows the guy has a bomb in his suitcase. He tries to write on the mirror. He erases it. He writes it on the cocktail napkin, and then he calmly sits down and then waits for the plane to land, and then just walks off the plane. And he has no emotion about it. But the fact is that he's followed a guy that he knew had a bomb onto a plane and gets on the plane anyway, and then gets off again, which is insane. So I guess he is the perfect guy.
Yeah, the corporation's right. They have profiled him accurately.
Yeah.
And he's creating unfortunately, the myth and the narrative that's perfect for him to be patsy. Makes me think of not the characters, but just similar patterns to the movie Shooter with Mark Wahlberg, Marky Mark. Mm-hmm. But one thing I did want to mention that I forgot to mention was like all that scene with the redneck sheriff and all that. And this had to be like around the time of Dukes of Hazzard. Like, so they were probably just say like, let's just put in a whole sequence that's like Dukes of Hazzard level stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah, even the music gets crazy. I mean, the score is Basil Polidoris, and the car chase turns into like wah wah wah, no, honk honk, like crazy zany noises, and then they jump. The car's jumping. Gordon Willis said that when he was talking about the cuts in the movie and framing the movie, he said that the only scene that he disagreed with the director about was that particular scene. First of all, he said the fight scene. His expression was, he said, we had to they had to choreograph this fight scene, and he fights the sheriff, and I was like, what are you doing? What is this? This doesn't fit in the movie. I don't understand. And then we had to go through this long, tedious car chase where it didn't make sense. He said it was his least favorite scene that he's ever filmed. But I guess the point is that, again, the things don't fit. It's like even the audience watching the thing, we've been watching this sort of heavy-handed conspiracy movie, and all of a sudden we're in some sort of zany car chase like we're watching a movie, like Warren Beatty is in a movie of his own mind. So it's like the things don't quite fit. Even when by the way, did you notice that the deputy that he fights at first, the weird guy who comes up to him and he's like, hey, boy.
Yeah, he says, girl.
Did you know that? Did you notice that guy is Wilson, the neighbor in Home Improvement?
No, I didn't. I noticed he did look familiar, and then I noticed the guy that he's talking to when he's riding that little train around the park. That's Otto, who plays the owner of the ranch in Malcolm in the Middle.
So there you go. The movie predicted
a lot of weird figures that pop up later and other things.
Well, the train scene is weird because, he's got to go talk to a guy, and they're going to go talk about a pulmonary embolism pill, a PEP pill that, is that the same thing Frank Church talked about, at the church hearings when they talked about the heart attack gun and the things that could, and this is before that, I suppose. So the weapons that can mimic a heart attack, there'd be no evidence of it. But it's crazy because they're sitting on toy trains. Like, I guess they're hiding in plain sight, and there's movement. They're constantly moving through the narrative of the movie, but they're on these toy trains. Like it's I don't know what that is. It's some sort of like it's a game, I suppose. Like he's on a track that he can't get off of until the end of the movie. Or it's some sort of game he's playing, like he's a child on adventures. It was very strange place to talk to this guy. And the strangest scene for me that I can't really understand is the first time we see him after 3 years, and Warren Beatty like knocks on this door, and it's this old, couple inside, and he's like, yeah, my parrot's in the backyard. I need to get my parrot. And he just walks into the house, and then he turns around and again is looking through the looking glass into the house. And then there's like a drug raid. And I can't understand what he was doing. Was he investigating something? What was it said? It's almost like he shows up at the house not knowing what he's doing there. And says this
seems
thing,
like you said, like he's wandering through all of this.
Yeah. And the fact that he's looking for his parrot also, it's like he's parroting the things that he's supposed to say. And there's a weird drug raid, almost like this is the part where he's going to be compromised into whatever the program is, because he ends up getting bailed out by Hume Cronin, and they're going to charge him with a bunch of stuff, but he's going to get, but he kind of talks his way out of it. It's almost like a first test. But how did he get there? What's he doing? I didn't understand that. Yeah.
I didn't even catch that. That's a good point. Yeah, you made some really good points too about how, like, his character is not like he doesn't at all act like a normal person. And I think that's why they call him an unusual personality, right? When the guy comes to talk to him, he says, we're really in the business of looking for unusual personalities, and we think you fit it. And the first time I watched it, I didn't really pay attention to that. I just thought, well, he's just this journalist who's like trying to get a scoop. And then this next time through, it's like, no, there's a lot more that's off with him that you don't realize the first time through. And then you start to notice more and more like how messed up he really is. And they've figured that out. You're figuring that out, like the corporation has figured that out. And they're just tweaking him into, they're nudging him into being the perfect patsy. That, again, to bring it to like modern day, that's a lot more likely what I think happened in the last big event. You know, according to the official story of who the person is in terms of the shooter. If that's that guy, Crooks, you know, he seems to be this kind of a person. This, I mean, not identical to Warren Beatty, but a person who's nudged into this situation. And when I talked to Sammy the Bull right after it had happened, he said, well, if I was doing this, that's what I would have done. I would find somebody who would be a suitable, perfect patsy candidate. He says, we would have told him, we'll give him the moon, right? We're going to promise you all this stuff. You're going to be a hero. Don't worry. We're going to protect you. But we have a contingency plan all along that he would be taken out. Right.
Right.
And I think that's, you know, the exact same attitude of the corporation here, Parallax. And I think this also, again, fits with probably the way things really occur, is that people are profiled not because the establishment is ultimately a bunch of heroes who bust crimes. I mean, crimes are busted on a mid and low level, but at this kind of a level, no, they're profiling individuals to find out who's a suitable, useful psychopath that can be a tool for this sort of, you know, supra international corporate entity that's not bound by any rules or laws. And I thought it was fascinating too that they used all kinds of methods. I mean, they poison, you know, his editor. They will sniper other people. I mean, they have all the means at their disposal, and they have very adept stagecraft. And essentially, the whole final sequence is getting Warren Beatty into the position of being in the rafters at not the actual event, which is fascinating because they didn't do it at an actual event. They do it at the rehearsal, which makes more sense to actually get the job done. And, you know, he's in exactly the position that they wanted him. And so he's played the entire time, and he ends up becoming the perfect patsy because he fit the profile of the perfect patsy. But that stagecraft dimension I thought was pretty fascinating. That the first time I watched it, I was like, well, he's a patsy, but I didn't think about how well the corporation had played him.
Yeah, car crashes, plane crashes, poisoning, drug overdose, heart attacks. It's all the sort of common things. The scene with the sheriff and the deputy reminded me also of JFK with the event happens, and then they roll out the patsy. He says he's a patsy, and then this guy in a 10-gallon hat comes out, you know, in the famous photograph. And it was just like that. Also, all of the movies and books that I've read with, you know, with Leos acting as sort of hired enforcement for this. And one of the things in the movie is there's a continuous like series of initiations into this. And one of those is obviously with the deputy. You know, the deputy comes up, insults him, degrades him. It's in a public place. There's a honeypot right there. There's a, you know, Springmeier MK Beta sex kitten that comes up right up to him in the bar. You know, and when you watch the movie, it's like, oh, the two guys, the two hillbillies or whatever in the bar are going to be angry because the girls got up and left. But actually, they let the fight go on. And he's even, I mean, again, he's like even being thrown through walls. They destroy the bar until finally the sheriff, just cool, calm, and collected, is like, I wouldn't have let it go on too long if I thought it was going to be bad. Let's go fishing. And then he takes him to the very scene where the last guy was killed. And where the last guy was, he walks right into this. And this is a crazy scene. If you guys haven't seen this movie, this is a crazy scene because he goes to this dam and we get this giant wall, the giant, you know, cement wall, this concrete wall. And there are the rocks and there's this little stream. He kind of goes down to investigate. And you hear this huge siren. It reminded me of that new movie, The Zone of, is it Zone of, I forget, the Zone movie about the World War II thing. This loud, almost like programming siren to snap you into whatever it is. And it's so loud. And all the water coming out, it's like the waters are rushing. The things are about to happen, just like with the train. You know, there's going to be a flood of events. And they don't move. They're just standing there. And he turns around And the sheriff is holding a gun on him, and he quickly snaps him in the head with a fishing rod, and he's got a fishing rod.
He like whips him with the
yeah, it's so fast. And he whips him with it, and then they fall into the river, which is my thing. Like, whenever I watch movies and this happens, and you're being chased, I always think, just jump into the water, just get away. The sheriff is so fat anyway. He's like swimming away from the guy. He gets up, steals the sheriff's car, goes to his house. He goes right to his house, goes right into his house, walks right into his library, opens the drawer, and he finds the leaflets for now. I guess he's been initiated into this thing. And here's the Phoenix program test list of and the list is hilarious. It's like, do you ever feel like you have no friends? Do you ever feel like everyone's against you? Do you wish you could blowtorch the whole world? I mean, it's like, yeah. and then of course, then he goes to the MKUltra lab, but it's almost like a series of initiations, and Beatty is very weird. I know Warren Beatty Warren Beatty before this was in his real life was in the McGovern inner circle right before the movie was made. He was like close friends with McGovern, and then they couldn't make the movie because there was a writer's strike, but he pushed the movie through anyway. McGovern? Is it George McGovern?
Oh, I thought you meant the CIA analyst, Ray McGovern.
I think it's George. Yeah, he was a big, big Democrat donor for them. Oh, Warren Beatty's also from here, by the way. He's from Richmond. Warren Beatty and his older sister, Shirley MacLaine, are weirdly from here, and like they weren't just born here; they grew up here. And also the writer of the book, his name is Lauren Singer, was OSS. Mm-hmm. And his name is Lauren Adelson Singer. I couldn't find any connection with the obvious person, but it always plays out this way. It always plays out that the outer events, like you were saying, that the stagecraft of the events themselves always seem to mirror and mimic the making of the movie itself. Right. So 3 Days of the Condor, there's that famous picture that was in Vanity Fair or whatever of Richard Helms and what's his name? What's the actor's name? In 3 Days of the Condor. Oh my God, I can't. Sundance Film Festival. What's the guy? All the President's Men. Dustin Hoffman and can't think of the 70s actor. The big guy. Somebody in the chat. What's the guy's name?
Donald Sutherland. Isn't he the bad guy in 3 Days?
Donald Sutherland was in this guy's previous movie, which was Clute. But Robert Redford. That's who I'm thinking. Oh, Robert Redford and Richard Helms are off. They're on that. Richard Helms came to visit the set of 3 Days of the Condor as a paid consultant for this. So it's very weird. The stagecraft, the sort of stagecraft element, as if, and that obviously comes to play with Argo, where we have Hollywood working with intelligence. But I think the weirdest part of this movie is that, like, you were mentioning before, that I think the reason the movie's successful is because the shenanigans aren't too. It's like the programming scene. It's very matter of fact. There's no mind bending psychic break. We go to the office of the corporation. They literally have human engineering on the kiosk to go up into the place. The guy comes and visit him. He's walking around. They go to grocery stores. It's very matter of fact, which I don't know what that means, other than it says to me that sometimes there's the deep seaspiracy, but there's also the just completely hidden in plain sight.
Yeah, and he reminds the psychology of Warren Beatty as this protagonist reminds me of Nick Cage in 8mm. Like Nick Cage in 8mm is kind of messed up, and he can't quit following this rabbit hole, right? Like even though there's every red flag possible is constantly in his face, he can't stop, right? He must pursue this for whatever reason. And it's sort of like, why is he doing this, right? I mean, he's lost everything, and but he continues with this. There's another movie we just watched that also, on the stagecraft point, reminds me of this film. Have you ever seen the Brian De Palma 1984 movie Body Double?
Yeah, Yeah, I was just talking about that with somebody the other day. Yeah, it's another one of these. Yeah.
Yeah, in Body Double, the main character is an actor who can't find work. Well, he has work, and but he has crippling claustrophobia, and this other prominent guy, wealthy actor guy, utilizes this weakness in him as this character who's sort of led along this path the entire time to play a role as the eyewitness to a staged murder. I mean, there's a murder, but it's all staged, and it's not what you think it is. And it's a situation where this, high level Hollywood person is utilizing the tricks of Hollywood to beat the cops, and he's even casting his traumatized friend, or not really a friend, but his buddy. And then there's this really weird voyeuristic sort of
Melanie Griffith. Is it Melanie
yeah,
Griffith?
there's like meta levels of voyeurism where he's intended to be voyeuristically looking at people through a window, and then other people are watching the whole thing, and and then it turns into him having to enter into the world of Prawn and take on an alternate. It's almost like he's a mind controlled individual as well, because he's traumatized. So the main character there is more of a weak, traumatized person, trauma-based mind control person. Warren Beatty is not at all weak. He's sort of like the ultimate assassin, I guess you could say, because he really fears nothing. Like, at no point does he. I mean, he only really fears his own end, but nothing else, right? He wants.
Yeah.
I don't even think he cares about the scoop anymore, right? At a certain point, it's just sort of like he can't resist continuing down this path. Like, why wouldn't he just walk away at a certain point when he realizes what he's up against?
Yeah, I think he's on a trajectory, like with the train scene, that he doesn't show any indication of human feelings. I mean, when he's confronted by his girlfriend or his friend or whatever, and she says to him, "Oh, all these things are happening," and then that's a great scene, because that actress is in just like those two scenes, and she's great, because when she shows up, we assume there's a relationship or a former relationship between them, even if it's just that they happen to be at the same event before, or they were both journalists or whatever. But she's trying to tell him what's happening, and he says to her, she says, "I'm in fear for my life," and he's like, "Oh, more in fear than you were the last time?" And she says, "I've never committed suicide successfully before." And then the drug scene, or the overdose scene, happens, I guess, and then he's in he goes to visit her which is another strange scene, because when we see her lying on the slab in the morgue, we see her and we see the two doctors talking, and then it's only after they leave the room that Warren Beatty, he's off frame, comes into frame, like he's now walking into this new life or whatever. But nowhere in the movie does he show anything other than that he wants, like you're saying, like he wants to continue. He needs money. He needs an advance. And even the scene where it's just the strangest scene, where he's at home and he's cooking, and he gets a knock on the door, and the guy comes in, and this is clearly, he knows he's being hunted. He's been hunted. Everybody knows he's in this thing now, but he leaves the door open. He's like, "Well, I guess you can come in if you want to." And the guy walks in, and this is the guy who's going to be his handler. And he just turns around. And then the guy has this line. He says, "So how tall are you? 6'1"?" And the guy says, and Warren Beatty says 6'2". And then he's like, I thought you were taller than that. And he's like, "Who gives a fuck how tall I am, buddy?" And then you notice in that scene, when he's cooking, he like burns his hand and he drops it, and he freaks out. He has a spaz, and the guy like has this slight smile on his face, this smirk, and he's like, "Yeah, you're just the guy. You're just the unhinged guy that we want." Telling him to put water and ice on it, like as if he's a grown man who doesn't know what to do after he's burned his hand. But he needs these handlers throughout the movie, and he only freaks out in the very last scene when he sees the light from the door open, and he starts running towards the door as if he can get away, and that's it.
We were watching that, and I was wondering, like, why does he lay there so long? Because if he had gotten up when he first sees the doorway, he might have made it, but he hesitates for so long.
Yeah, I think he also crawls down onto the thing where the gun was. So he walks right, he goes right into it, which is also kind of indicative of the beginning of the movie when the waiter, the guy who was in his role at the beginning of the movie also runs out into the light, into the outside, and also falls down onto something else. And it's also that he continuously walks right into the places where the other people have been assassinated. So like with the plane scene or with the dam scene, the other scene that we haven't mentioned is when he finally finds Austin Tucker, the guy with the glasses at the beginning, who is the political consultant, who apparently has enough money to insulate himself, and he has he sends his bodyguard to go find him.
Right.
When I was watching, when I was watching the movie for the first time, they get on the boat. And I was thinking, don't get on this boat, dude. You think you're safe everywhere, anywhere you go. The boat is haven't you read the things? The boat is the last place you're going to be safe. So he gets on the boat. They're sailing. The guy does this weird thing where he like takes a nap for 5 minutes and then he gets back up. He's back at the back of the boat with his bodyguard. And then the boat blows up and Beatty just like jumps off the boat into the water. But I thought, this is Armax. Maxwell was killed on the boat. I was just rereading about Mountbatten. Mountbatten was assassinated on his boat in Sligo.
And that one's William Colby went boating and never returned.
That's right. Yeah, on the I guess on the Potomac. And like you think about what is Skull and Bones like more than going yachting. I guess this is their thing. I don't know if that's connected, but I'm just saying that I was rereading about the Mountbatten thing in the 70s, and what happened with that was that Mountbatten was in County Sligo at his house, and the bomber, this guy, Thomas McMahon, found out that he was there and put the bomb on the boat. And when he had notoriously lax security, and Mountbatten's statement about it was, who wants to kill an old guy anyway? It's like, it's royal family connected. So there was no security. And then there was recently, I think there was a guy who came out after the Good Friday Agreement and said, yeah, he put the bomb on the boat, but I'm the guy who planned it. And the guy who planned it was ex-Army. So in other words, that also is weird because I've read that's somehow intelligence had something to do with that because of Mountbatten's, the creepy things in his life or how he was compromising the royal family. So they wanted him eliminated anyway. And British intelligence was partly running IRA anyway. They ran, the chief spy catcher for the IRA and the IRA Army Council was this guy, Freddie Scappaticci.
They also set up a brothel using a Jewish organized gangster guy in Ireland that entrapped several of the IRA, and they did a bunch of false flags blaming on the IRA. So the chief spy catcher was the top IRA spy, which came out in 2003 when I was living there. He was a British agent. And he was the chief spy catcher for his whole job was for the Army Council for the IRA to catch spies that were snitching on the IRA. And he was an agent, of course, which is just like The Departed or something. But yeah, so he gets off the boat, and he escapes and he walks right into this thing. And it's just interesting, I think, that with these 70s films, I'm not sure what the point seems too obvious to make. I know that that the director, one of his statements about his films, he did Clute and All the President's Men, and one of his statements was, and he did The Devil's Own, which is an IRA movie, which is ties into this. But one of his statements was that he wanted people in the cinema to look at the person next to them with a little more suspicion, to be a little bit more uneasy about what you see in your daily life, which kind of, plays into the post Watergate era, post Vietnam and all this stuff. But it's interesting that what we've seen since then, and with the event that just happened with Trump and all, these things seem to come to light more and more. And especially with the one that just happened, in plain sight on television, you wonder, what's the end goal besides the kind of, is it future shock? Is it terrorizing the public? Is it making them uneasy? Giving a continuous sense of chaos? Is it making people not believe their lying eyes? I mean, what is it? What
what's the end goal with just the continuous series of these events?
Well, when Toffler talks about future shock, he means that things are coming that are gonna be so upending, so such upheavals that society won't be able to process it. So there's things that are coming that are just going to be mind blowing with tech, with the way that lifestyles will change. You know, he was writing in the 1970s about alterations in diet and people transitioning into new ways of living, polycules, vegetarianism, anarchism. You know, Toffler was saying that all that would be utilized and basically pushing us into the technocratic future. And there is that subtle technocratic theme, which is hinted at throughout this movie, again, with the human engineering, the monkeys, the video games, all of that, is that just as they're playing and being studied, you know, Beatty's being played and being studied. And so in the same way, the attitude of the technocrats is to view the humans in general in this way. So I think I read it even with the technocratic theme here, that really we're all Warren Beatty's being studied and being moved into the kind of future where we can be managed like lab rats, like you know, monkeys. There's that book that came out, World as a Laboratory, which is this mindset. But yeah.
Is the scene with the, you know, the Ludovico scene in this, is the point that, I mean, it starts off with, you know, it's just still, I mean, we mentioned, but it's still scenes and words flashing on the screen and still images, sort of archetypal images. And then it slowly starts to dissociate. So now we start to associate, like it says, you know, country. And then we show scenes from Vietnam. And then there's father, and there's like a kid running in the hall. And then we see like hanging, you know, we start to see more and more grotesque imagery. But is it slow? Like, did they pace it that way in the film because it's a kind of slow burn for the audience watching it? I mean, one of the things about Clockwork Orange is that when I watch the movie, I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I've seen it a million times. It's not shocking to me. But obviously the movie is shocking still to some people, even with the implications, you know, in the movie. And also that it's also interesting that the movie was banned in England by Kubrick. He's the one who pulled it from so it makes me think, what did you make the movie to play it, only to pull the movie because the absence of the imagery actually going to the theater is more shocking than actually seeing the movie? And does it drive sales? Does it, you know, all the sort of typical things, but it's like there's a veneer about the film that it's so bad that it can't even be shown in England. So it kind of drives interest in it in America or whatever. But my point is all this happening because this is the kind of thing that we deal with now, for instance, like with doom scroll, with the, you know, obviously people are completely desensitized to things, but is it a constant refresh, right, of the screen? Is it just scrolling where you see, you get on TikTok and a person could see, especially a young person could see cats and, you know, flowery scenes in America or flags mixed in with, you know, murders and executions and war scenes.
Yeah, well, it is like disorienting because it's like a constant machine gun array, and there's no real consistent pattern to it, except that some of the images and words repeat. So maybe we're also supposed to think of subliminals. It was also kind of becoming popular at this time to know about subliminals. This was like some of the first points at which people were thinking, oh, they're actually putting, I mean, in other words, I know subliminal advertising goes earlier than this, but people were starting to figure this out around this time. There was also those subliminals, for example, that Aaron and Melissa had discovered over at TruthStream some years back, where they had noticed the old public service announcements that would come on when the TVs would go at night. You know what I'm talking about? When the channels would go off, they would play the national anthem. And they had discovered that there were subliminals within the national anthem that was being played. And the subliminals were very reminiscent of what you see in the movie. It's stuff like, you know, follow the state, worship, God, remember your country, just weird stuff like that. So that it made me think of that. And it is interesting again that it's so innocuous in terms of that he's not really doing anything other than sitting in a chair. And they say, and make sure to put your hands inside the holsters or whatever. So he's got to put his hands inside of something.
Yeah.
And he's not supposed to move. But when you compare this to the other images and films that we get, like we had watched Total Recall, because I just wrote the chapter in Esther Colley with the Real and Total Recall. And like, that's this just totally invasive, like brain machine that you sit in. And it's like, Arnold's like losing his mind, going full like Arnold-gasm over there.
Yeah.
And then you've got, other presentations, like you said, like the Ludovico method. I don't know. I'm just contrasting all of the
or Jacob's Ladder. Like, we watched Jacob's Ladder, and it's just the absolute most hellish.
Well, we did Return to Oz, and they put Dorothy Gale. They put her on the electroshock table.
Yeah,
strap her down. So,
yeah. That film kind of has almost an exorcist thing. Well, sort of. I mean, in the sense of, the famous scene in The Exorcist where they had the psyop and putting Pazuzu, flashing 3 times throughout the film, and the kind of, but that movie's different because if you're going to test audiences as far as what can drive them to their extreme point, the tone of the movie is already so horrible, right? So the beginning of the movie is already silence and the sound of wind, and then juxtaposed with pictures of statues of Pazuzu and faces looking at you, and then mixed in with, I think the real subliminal thing in that movie is the fact that the girl in The Exorcist is mimicking what her mom's boyfriend says to her downstairs. So all of this, I think there's something to that the fact that the sexual creepy stuff that she says when she's possessed is indicative of the fact that the possession and the ABUSD go hand in hand with what made her that way. And because you can hear, like, when she starts really cursing in the movie and saying the overtly sexual stuff, you can hear the guy say it earlier in the movie when he's downstairs at the party. And it's it implies that she was left alone with this guy at the house. And so she's mimicking, that's the sort of a subliminal thing in the movie where we can't really, why did this happen? Where did this come from? Other than the fact that the mother also in that movie is an actress. Right.
And don't forget that the author explicitly worked for the CIA.
William Peter Blatty.
Yeah. And then what's interesting, and a lot of people consider it one of the worst movies ever. If you make it to, I think it's part 3, Exorcist 2, maybe I'm thinking of 2, the one that has Richard Burton in it.
Yeah, that's 2.
That's 2. Yeah, it's considered one of the worst movies ever. But the beginning of the film, it's this secret government thing that's studying children like Linda Blair and others who've had these issues, and they specifically say autistic children. So this is some sort of odd government, almost MKUltra type of project that's going on. And I mean, it keeps with the theme of, the satanic and all that. But then in the third one with the Gemini killer, we also have these themes of, again, Phoenix program to kill type stuff. And as you probably know, Dahmer was a odd obsessive fan of the Gemini killer version of the part 3. And he would supposedly watch it and just rock back and forth watching his VHS tape of Exorcist 3.
Yeah, I did an analysis of William Peter Blatty's book, which is called Twinkle, Twinkle, Killer Kane. It's a terrifying title. And there's a movie called The Ninth Configuration.
Yes.
Which stars Stacy Keach in it. And that's a blatant Phoenix program movie. I mean, and again, in that, the protagonist of the movie is playing an unwitting role in finding himself in the very position that he does at the end of the book, at the end of the film, where he's been hunting himself. So if people remember, like, he's brought into this castle with a bunch of people that have gone, they've Section 8 or whatever from the army during Vietnam. One of the guys is a supposed to be an astronaut, and they're trying to put on a Shakespearean production, and they're all actors in this kind of Marat Sade avant-garde Shakespearean production within a castle where they end up sort of playing the fools or playing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And the psychiatrist who's brought in to diagnose them is Stacy Keach. And then he later in the end of the film, spoiler people, at the end of the film, at the end of the book, he's broken in this fight where he's trying to defend the astronaut who's being stomped on by this motorcycle, this like Kenneth Anger, Scorpio Rising motorcycle gang in a bar. And he breaks to the extent where he realizes he is Kane. He's Killer Kane, the guy he's been looking for. And he remembers, he has a flashback to where he just was right before this, which was in the jungles in Vietnam. And he's carrying like heads. And he's called Killer Kane because he uses like a piano wire. So he's a pure like Phoenix program guy.
Mm-hmm.
And in the book, it explains, or it shows that he did that thing in the jungle. He went back. They exfilled him out of the jungle. They immediately told him, you're a psychiatrist. Here's your ID. Here's your mission. And he was programmed right into it, put on the uniform, went, and then immediately went and did this thing where he's now a doctor. It's total dissociation. But again, it's just like this film with Parallax, where he just kind of walks into it. Knife Gate also kind of does that. I mean, Johnny Depp is playing this. Yeah, he's playing like a noir detective who's like on a mission to find this book and whatever, but ends up being the guy who fulfills the very thing in the book at the end of it.
Do you remember too that this is a totally ridiculous movie, but isn't it Universal Soldier where Dolph is like, he trips out and flashes back to being the guy who like collects the ears from Vietnam, but he's like a reprogrammed super soldier.
Yeah, he's
right? Is the Universal Soldier? I haven't seen it forever, but isn't that right?
It is. Yeah, it's Universal Soldier, and his character in that is based on the guy. What's the name of that colonel that Colonel Kurtz is partly based on from Apocalypse Now?
Oh,
the guy who did the ears for beers. Yeah, he said ears for beers. He collected ears on a necklace.
Yeah.
And that documentary about that guy's funny because it's not funny, but he looks exactly like Marlon Brando in the movie.
I always thought that like in the Brando portrayal, like they give him this very Crowleyan sort of image and look. Like he's bald, and in a couple of scenes, it actually looks like he's Crowley over there.
Yeah, there's that famous picture of Crowley like in the black pajamas, basically like doing, with this nasty big old bald head. Also, what's his name? The Stellan Skarsgård character in Dune is clearly stolen from, purposefully stolen from Kurtz. There's a scene in. What's his name? What's the name of the bad guy? The bad guy.
Baron Harkonnen.
Yes, but so the Baron, when they first show him and he rises out of the black goo and he's all bald, he does this thing where he like rubs his giant paw over his bald head.
Rub, and it's just like Brando.
It's just like Kurtz. And I think that I did an Apocalypse Now analysis and then Heart of Darkness, and the Apocalypse Now film is obviously supposed to be it's a Phoenix program film. It's pure Phoenix program. I mean, even Scott Glenn's character Colby is the proto Willard in that, because when he gets to the place and they see all the heads and he says Colby, and he's like standing there with like a shotgun.
It's meta LSD MKUltra too, because of the Martin Sheen story that he's really tripping in that scene when he loses it. Is that true, or is that a legend?
Well, so Martin Sheen had a heart attack on the set. I think he actually did have a heart attack. He was too old to play the character. So Martin Sheen's Willard was a last minute fill in because Harvey Keitel had already shot some of the scenes. He was supposed to be the guy, and they thought, let's get Harvey Keitel because he was actually a Marine. We'll put him in this thing, but he just didn't screen test well or whatever. I mean, he was already shooting the film. So then they brought in Martin Sheen, and when Martin Sheen did that first scene of, hey buddy, you gonna shut the door? I mean, he's like, does the Tai Chi karate chops the mirror and it smashes his hand, but he had a heart attack in that scene. The one who was on LSD was Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper and Lance the Surfer were both so whacked out on, I think, like amphetamine and LSD when they filmed the scene, that Dennis Hopper's character, who is pure, like that's the jester character from Heart of Darkness. He's the same character. He's the photojournalist. You can't go out into space, man. You can't go out into space. And he said that when he got there, that Brando like hated him. So when he threw the book at him in the scene where he's talking about dialectic physics, man, you either, dialectic logic, you either love somebody or you hate him. And Brando throws Jesse Weston's From Ritual to Romance like at his head while he's reading T.S. Eliot. And that was like real. they just kept rolling the film. So yeah, but it's the same sort of thing. I think Apocalypse Now is kind of the sort of like the apex of these types of films because it's so stylized and so surrealistic, so dreamlike, and it's people watch the film and say that this guy's insane, but actually he's super sane. He's like hyper sane. He says, I was above their lying petty morality. Whereas something like you were mentioning, the body double, there's a movie called The Osterman Weekend with John Hurt, which is in the same, it's like the tail end of this 1983. And again, it deals with spies, and a guy the first scene is like, he's like doing the hunka chunka with this lady, and he walks out, and then she's assassinated before he comes back in, and they filmed it all. So it's a compromise situation, but also that the director of these films, Alan J, I thought it was Pakula. I guess it's Pakula. That's what the guy was saying. But anyway, he died under very weird circumstances, just like in Omen and in Osterman. A scene in Osterman Weekend, he was like driving along, and some metal like piece of a building flew off of a building and like impaled him in his car.
Like in Omen.
Yeah, like in the Omen.
Wow.
And at the funeral, they were like, well, I mean, this guy couldn't have filmed it better, I guess, but life and art sort of finding their synthesis somewhere in the middle of those. But so in the end, with Parallax View, I mean, I just think this movie is so crazy. It's a big film. It's one of these big 70s films. And it seems like one that would be, ripe for a remake, but I don't know if they could do that.
Well, I'll tell you, yeah, we just watched a couple other 70s films that are pretty wild that they couldn't really be remade. And one of them, like we did Dress to Kill, we got on a Brian De Palma kick. We've been watching all his because he seems to more consistently than I expected to use this whole theme of, dissociation, trauma-based mind control. It's all over Brian De Palma films, which I should have known given the fact that he did Black Dahlia. But we watched Dress to Kill, where Michael Caine is a, psycho TRANZ killer. Mm-hmm. Spoiler alert, you don't know that until the end, but now you do. Yeah. And that also has all the same voyeuristic, weird obsession stuff that's in all the Brian De Palma movies. But another one that's overlooked in the same vein is Raising Cain, where
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
Michael or John Lithgow.
Yeah.
A multiple who has female alters, apparently, if by the end of the film at least, and that allows him to escape. And his dad is said to be a mad scientist who's experimenting with traumatizing and creating and programming the alters. So we know that obviously De Palma has some fascination and knowledge of this, and to what degree he's consulted with agencies or whatever, I don't know, but it's obviously there. But you couldn't make Dress to Kill again because Michael Caine is, I mean, we're in the era now where we're supposed to accept all of this as normal and holy. And of course, Michael Caine's got, what's he got? He's got a like a barber's knife, right? He's like, I've got to cut it off. I've got a blade, will I? What's he say? In the movie, what do they call him? Peeny Waggles. I was going to say that in Michael Caine voice. Marsha Wayne,
Mr. Jingles.
I've got a willy wagger, weenie wagger. That's what he says. Weenie wagger.
Have you seen the movie Dr. Giggles?
A long time ago. when it came out.
Yeah.
I've not seen it since.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of that. That and Dark Man, both sort of. It's the same character in both of those.
Well, Brian De Palma also does this thing where there's this like there's a flash of light all the time. So when Michael Caine is supposed to be terrorizing the prostitute in Dressed to Kill, she sees the flash of light in the glint of the knife. In Femme Fatale with Rebecca Ramin Stamos, she's also a double alter Brian De Palma assassin thief woman. There's a flash of light at the final sequence on the corner where all the stuff happens. Anyway, he does this in a lot of his films. So I don't know if that's like signaling the altering, stepping into another persona or what, but
yeah, well, that happened in Return to Oz. Remember, I mean, she's lying she's getting seen by the doctor, and there's the lightning storm outside. There's a flash of light, and then she runs away and ends up in the river. But then when we see the scene where the doctors are looking at her, like all of the instruments look like the characters that she meets. So the TikTok character is the electroshock machine. And the same thing happens in that same sort of glint thing happens, which in Red Dragon. Have you seen Red Dragon?
Yes,
Red
exactly.
Dragon. Yeah,
it's like everything turns transfigured, basically.
Yeah, I mean, he there's a great scene in Red Dragon where he kidnaps the journalist Philip Seymour Hoffman, right? And he like straps him down in the wheelchair, and he says, "You are part of a great becoming." And he's got these tattoos on his back, and Philip Seymour says, "Oh no, oh no!" You know, he's just. And Ray Fiennes like turns around and he's like, he's got the Red Dragon.
He says something about, later on he says something like, I'm becoming a deity. It's apotheosis type of thing.
Yeah. He when he kidnaps Edward Norton's family at the end, he's holding his weapon is a mirror shard, which is like a triple meta thing here. He kills with a mirror shard. And he's holding the mirror shard to his face, and he says, he's changing. He's part of a great becoming. So the mirror shard, it's the same in Manhunter, I suppose. The mirror shard is the broken mirror is this broken mind.
The broken mind, yeah.
And he's going to transform him as part of this Red Dragon apotheosis, which is like a Gnostic, I guess a Gnostic apotheosis where he is now the beast. But he does that through, and also he's also in the scene with Philip Seymour Hoffman. He's also showing films, so he's strapped down.
He works at a film company. Remember?
That's right. Yeah. So this is off. I guess this is often the case with these characters. That who else worked at a film company? Not Dennis Rader. It was one of the other guys in Program to Kill worked at a film company.
Yeah.
And the film is the mirror, is the film of your own mind. You're the star of your own film.
Yes.
Which kind of is like almost every work that I've covered, almost every literary work has the structure of the house in it. And the best example is like in Wuthering Heights, the book Wuthering Heights, which Ray Fiennes is in the movie version. When Catherine, the ghost appears, remember, she's this phantasm haunting him that he calls her up. He calls her up out of the grave to haunt him, his psychic mind. And she comes to the window, right? So they're always either looking through the window outside or from outside in. And the house and the windows in the house always function as some sort of looking glass, some sort of psychic,
Yeah, I remember when
structure is flimsy.
I had an undergrad class on film and literature, and we did Wuthering Heights, and I remember this was like 10 years ago, but I remember thinking something like, wait a minute, is Heathcliff like an alter in her mind? Like, it's like a dissociation type of thing, or a demon, or what are we supposed to think?
Yeah. Well, I think Heathcliff has a kind of physical alter because, for one, he's an orphan. He's a street urchin, and he's adopted into this family. And the first time that we meet him, we go into the house, and he's like a monster ruling over the house. But he also wanders on the moors, like he's a werewolf or something.
Yeah, like he's a phantom or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and what happens is he's a child, and he is ill-treated by his family, especially his older brother, and then he disappears for like most of the novel, and then he returns, not most of the novel, but he returns as a different character. He's now a lord and rich, just like Rochester and Jane Eyre. But when he comes back, his whole purpose is like revenge against the family that gave him that, and he's always wandering looking for Catherine, even though he drove her into this thing. There's a great scene in the book, and it's in the Ray Fiennes version, where he's standing there with Juliette Binoche, and they've, she's Catherine, they're falling in love, and he like he covers her eyes, and he says, open your eyes. When you open your eyes, if the sky is bright, so shall your life be. But if you see storms, it'll be dark. She opens her eyes and she says, oh, it's a wonderful day. And then you hear this, and she turns around and it's stormy. And she says, oh no. And he's got like a smirk on his face. He's like, yeah, it's going to be stormy. But yeah, he's a kind of he's almost like some sort of Gnostic archon in the movie, because he doesn't seem real. And also we, the reader, are looking at him through the eyes of the visitor to the house in the first place. So there's a distance between us, and they're on the moors. So it's not, the locus isn't the typical London setting, with people all around. It's like, it's already isolated. It's almost like it's outside of time. So that happens quite frequently in literature. I mean, it happens in King Lear. It happens in Macbeth. He sort of does the same thing. He has a sort of a psychic break. Of course, in Macbeth, it's his wife who is in the coven, is my sort of what I think about that. Who's in the coven, who's driving him towards, he literally goes to a witch's Sabbath and drinks a brew.
Yeah.
And the odd thing about that is that all of the witch movies and all of the verbiage that they use and all the books and films since then have come from that. They come from that. And one of the reasons scholars say that the play is cursed is that he used a real spell in the play. So it's an inverted spell in terms of its verse. So when they're putting all their things in the cauldron, it seems to be real, which would make sense because he wrote it for King James, and King James wrote demonology in 1547. So, but anyway, but this movie doesn't really have that. It's totally almost straightforward with that, except for, it's almost like it's the opposite of that. Instead of having the cinematic bright flashes and the typical things that you would see, it's almost so straightforward. I mean, I just have a hard time like getting over Warren Beatty's character in this. I mean, he played Jay Sebring in Shampoo. He's mixed in with Polanski and Jack Nicholson. That's in his life, not in the film, but he later is in political films. He's in Bulworth and all that kind of stuff or whatever.
And he marries Madonna for a while.
So weird.
Isn't that weird?
So odd. But anyway, you guys, that is the Parallax View, 1974. Anything else you want to say about the film?
It'd be cool. We should probably we should do a couple more of these 60s, 70s era political conspiracy thrillers like this. There's, the classic Conversation with Gene Hackman is a great one to analyze. We could do something like Day of the Jackal. We could do something like there's a ton of these. I found several Michael Caine. I found several Michael Caine from the 60s and 70s that are also conspiracy intelligence thrillers. I mean, people are probably familiar with $1 Billion Brain, Ipcris File, where he's Harry, what's his face, the sort of the anti-James Bond character. But he's also in a bunch of these others, like the Holcroft Covenant, and he was doing quite a few of these British spy thrillers during the 60s and 70s. So those could be fun too.
Yeah, he's in a lot of movies. And actually, I was the other guy obviously is Donald Sutherland. I mean, Donald Sutherland is I just caught a replay of the movie Outbreak the other day, and I mean, even post 2020 rewatching Outbreak, it's just crazy. It's the same. It's just dramatized version of real life, And
we watched Outbreak during the coup, if I remember that.
And Donald Sutherland is in like all of these movies. And I was on TNT with Hesher covering Donald Sutherland in a film. I can't remember which one, but then he died. He passed away just right after that. Actually, and also I just did Chinatown Chinatown was written by what's the guy's name? John. I can't remember the guy who wrote Chinatown, but he passed away the next day, and he did the rewrites for this movie for Parallax View. The conversation, the conversation is great. When I covered that a while back, because it's NSA, it's NSA before NSA, you know, and it's so amazing. It's also obviously the prequel to Enemy of the State with Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman is in another, you know, you mentioned straight up Green
French
Beret
Connection too.
That's right. Yeah. And actually the French Connection, the basis of the French Connection is the basis of what happens in 6 Days of the Condor. They switched the theme. So instead of oil fields, it's opium traffic.
Drugs, yeah.
Yeah. The Tom Clancy what is it called? Without Remorse is also drug based, and then they changed it for the Amazon, which kind of ruined it.
Well,
there's
also some of these other. There's Coma. I think that's a Michael Crichton where they're basically organ trafficking, but also overlaps with mind control. Odessa File. I wrote down several possibilities here. Day of the Jackal. French Connection. I've never seen Executive Action. You might have covered that. I don't know.
No, I haven't covered it, but I was just thinking about it during this because it totally fits in line with this. Blowout is another one.
Yeah, with
that I need to get to with
Goofy Face
with Travolta.
John Travolta,
yeah.
Andromeda Strain is really boring. I've tried watching. We tried watching it in the coop. I'd seen it before, and I tried watching it again. And it put me to sleep. Oh, The Fury. We did The Fury with the guys over at PSYOP Cinema, which was fun. Isn't that Brian De Palma too?
Yeah, I think so. And the day of the you mentioned the Day of the Jackal. The book by Forsyth is amazing. And the Day of the Jackal is a great film. You know that I just before I came on here, I saw an ad for they remade it with Eddie Redmayne. Eddie Redmayne was in The Good Shepherd, right? And it's a remake of Day of the Jackal, which would also fit. And I mentioned Day of the Jackal when we were on DPH. I think I mentioned it because anytime you talk about assassinations and all this stuff, Day of the Jackal obviously plays into it. And Day of the Jackal is great because it's like this difference between 60s conspiracy films and 70s. You have the early Manchurian Candidate and you have Day of the Jackal, and then and OAS and World War II related events. A lot of Michael Caine movies are World War II related. The Eagle Has Landed and all these things. And then 70s gets into more what we have with this, which is gritty, sort of it's like they took cinema verite and European film in the end of the 60s, and then they finally caught, kind of got a handle on it and then made that into the 70s. And so they have this weird thing where they're making golden age Hollywood films. Like Chinatown and Godfather are clearly throwbacks to golden age Hollywood in terms of their look, but in terms of their form, but the content is wholly of the time and relevant and revelatory for right now. And I covered, I've got a book here called Hunting the Jackal, which is about the actual jackal. It's a great book. And there's a series on the jackal with what's the name? I can't remember his name. The French actor. That's pretty amazing. But the way that those change in terms of the De Gaulle event is pretty amazing. That's a great film. I mean, that's almost the complete opposite of the Parallax View. So yeah, it would be good to cover some of those. I mean, they keep coming up and they're so relevant.
Or if we don't have to do I wouldn't mind doing like a De Palma breakdown. You do Body Double,
Raising Cain,
Dressed to Kill, because it's all the same MK Ultra themes there.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Okay, sounds good. All right, guys. Hey, anybody got any super chats? Let me check the super chats real quick. Let's see here. And thanks everybody. Thanks to Jay for coming on tonight and discussing this.
It was a lot of fun.
Let's see. We got shouts out to Real John Connor. Let me get here. Shouts out to the Real John Connor who sent $10 in. And let's see what you said. If I can open it. Real John Connor sent $10 and says, for 10 McChickens long ago, 1.5 now. Yeah, you get 1.5 McChickens with $10. Thank you, real John Connor. Appreciate that. Yo, shouts out to Kristen Slowboy Whiteboard out there. Kristen sends $5 no comment. Thank you so much, Kristen. Really appreciate you there. Let's see. Let me look at the actual super chats there. Don't forget, you guys, you can grab a membership. I've been kind of off here for 2 weeks, busy with doing stuff in my life, but I'll be back doing member streams. I'll be coming back with I'm going to do an analysis of Lawrence of Arabia, and I've also got a couple sponsored streams coming up. I'm about to do Beast versus Man, so I'll be covering Cujo, the book by Stephen King, and also The Gray, the movie with Liam Neeson, and The Ghost of the Darkness with Val killing it. Also, another sponsored stream is I got The Trial, Franz Kafka, and then Cosmopolis by Don DeLeo. I've covered most of his work now, so we'll have that coming up. Let's look at some super chats here. Shouts out to Mav right there with $50. He says, fucking MLA, get after it. Love you and Jay. Bubonics out. Okay, thank you, Mav, for that $50. Big time. Thanks, man. Really appreciate that. Hey, shouts out to Jason right there. Thanks, Jason. Homeboy says, Jay, say the word abyss, please. That's $2. Jay, say the word abyss. I guess that's the drink.
I got to work on my Michael Caine to get it better.
That's the abyss. You're talking about the bloody abyss there.
That's the Cockney Michael Caine when he's playing.
There you go. There you go,
Jason.
Jason.
Playing like a butler and not somebody cool.
That's the bloody abyss. Oh, that's the bloody abyss.
That's their drinking game, because I say the word abyss, I guess, every stream talking about, I don't know, Paradise Lost or something. Shouts out to Jason right there. Shouts out to Peter A for $9.99. Says, you guys have to do these streams more often. Thanks, Peter. Really appreciate you. Thanks for that $10. Hey, Ortho Boomer Grandma sends $9.99. Yeah, sends $10. Great stream. Thanks, guys. Hey, thanks. Really appreciate you, OBG. Circle G sends $10 and says, maybe I missed it, but how about Warren Beatty's hair? Jay, is that what you were going for? Well, I guess
my hair looks
Warren Beatty's
like Warren Beatty's hair.
Yeah. Warren
Maybe
Beatty's hair
8 months ago when I was growing it, maybe.
Warren Beatty's hair in this is it looks like a wig. It's just a wig. It's a mop top. Yeah. Uh-oh, we lost him. He's coming back in. We should still be good. I think he's going to come back in if we lost today. Yeah, Warren Beatty's hair looks like a wig in this movie. It also looks like Jim. Shouts out to Circle G for that $10 right there. It looks like Jim Morrison's hair. It's clearly probably supposed to be Jim Morrison's hair. Of course, he died 3 years before this, 1971. And let's see, Pim dropped $5. Says Reindeer Game is a Christmas Rainer game. What's that? Is that supposed to be Reindeer Game? Thank you, Pim. Drops $5 and says is a Christmas movie. Reiner Game. Thank you, Pim. Really appreciate that. Now we were saying that Warren Beatty's mop in this looks like a wig, probably that he designed himself in the movie Shampoo, where he played Charlie Manson and Jay Sebring. But it also clearly looks like he's trying to imitate, I guess, Jim Morrison's hair from 3 years before this, maybe. But Warren Beatty's got something weird going. Like every time you look at him, he's got like duck lips going on in this. And sometimes he looks like Warren Beatty. Other times he's dressed like Jacob's Ladder, like traumatized.
Yeah. Hey, dude. Thanks for having me. It was a great chat.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. Hey, one more. We got $50 from Mav. Have you done Spartan yet? That's Val Kilmer. Thanks, Mav. Really appreciate it. Haven't done that.
Not Terrence Malick, or what's his name? That's a really good it's a really good film.
Val Kilmer.
Right, but he's seeking the president's daughter who's been kidnapped, and then there's like a lot of stagecraft going on in that. But it was written by what's his face? I just went blank.
The guy who did Glenn Ross, I think, the playwright. I think.
Yeah, but he's supposedly became a libertarian conservative a few years back, and then got blackballed from Hollywood because he was listening to Glenn Beck. Yeah. But yeah, I just went blank on his name.
Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate that $50. Hey, thanks everybody. Thanks, Jay. Really appreciate you. And we hope to speak to you soon, man. Appreciate you.
You'll have a good night.
All right, y'all. Peace. Peace, y'all. Thanks. See you next time. Hey, listen, was it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it if you're strong enough. That's right. Hey, everybody, if you want to support me, you can do that through anytime through super chats. And I will be back soon with those streams that I just mentioned. Love y'all. Appreciate y'all. That's all I got. And peace.